So I'm really grateful to be invited to have a chance to offer my understanding and my little piece of this very large puzzle we're working on here today. And this morning I was saying, someone was saying, this security thing coming into this theater is really intense. And I was saying to this person, I said, what we're doing here is revolutionary. What we're doing here is risk-taking. And there are strong feelings about it. There are strong emotions about it. And so I understand, and I'm grateful for that process, actually. But I think it's yet another signal, lest we don't want to say it to ourselves, but this is a revolutionary act for us to meet in this way. And so I'm grateful. So I do a lot of work around gender. And when I begin to speak about gender, and I love our topic, it's confronting gender, right? Just in case you were going to miss that part. And so before I ever enter into gender, I try to preface it with this. I say, so just like I was alluding to, so part of the tension and this confronting around gender is that gender is so connected to power in modern culture. Well, probably in every culture, but it's power in different ways in different cultures, right? And so what I say is that, right now, maybe dominant paradigm, human paradigm, is a power over paradigm. Something has to have power over another. The way that you succeed in this pyramid structure that I was pointing to is that you end up having to have power over somebody else so you can get a little farther up that pyramid. Now today, we're throwing around this statistic that says 80% of the wealth is held by 1% of the people. So that gives you an idea of how this power is moving. All the fruits of the labor, all the effort, all the wealth is slowly climbing up to this little piece right here. So in a power over paradigm, might makes right. And so literally, the physically stronger being has the right to dominate and also take the fruits of the labor. And so that can be a physical domination. And I would say in modern times, in our beautiful concrete and glass structure buildings, it's more implied than necessarily acted out. But be certain that violent power over is implicit. It's there. And so this structure is inherently violent because the only way to succeed in it is to overcome somebody else. So it's not conducive to what in Lakota culture I draw from this understanding of the sacred hoop of life. So in the sacred hoop of life, every life form, not just the five-fingered ones, we get to have a place on the hoop of life. We are not the whole hoop. But every life form, including the five-fingered ones, gets to have a place on this hoop. And if any one of the members of this hoop doesn't uphold their part, the hoop begins to fail, right? So this is how interrelated we are. As Thich Nhat Hanh says, this is our interbeingness. We are an interbeing. That's the structure of how this Mother Earth operates. And so for us, what I keep saying about it is this construct, this holy hoop of life, this Mother Earth, she doesn't understand us and them. She only understands we. That's her whole way of being. And so in this structure, we're having a difficult time right now because we keep having to leave someone else behind in order to have our needs met. Food, clothing, shelter. And so what I say is in this paradigm, you better keep your eye on who has the power, right? It's important. It's no joke. So we can talk about it and say, oh, well, everybody's so power obsessed. Well, yeah. Yeah, of course we are. And so in this power over paradigm, where we're keeping an eye on power, when we begin to talk about this feminine rising, when we begin to talk about the feminine voice being heard, when we begin to talk about the feminine must lead, as my relatives from the Sierra Nevadas in Colombia said to me, the women are going to lead. Right away, our first response, I would guess, for many of us, is to go, whoa, hold on a second. Where does that leave me? Where does that leave me in this power structure? Does that mean some of my power is being taken from me? Does this mean some of this power is being thrust on me in a system that I don't want to leave other people behind? So there's all these questions that come up around power. So I wanted to name that right away. And so in this power over paradigm, the feminine has been relegated to the lower rungs, if even being able to participate in any way in this paradigm, in this pyramid paradigm structure. And so I feel like that's really necessary to name. Now the next thing I wanted to say to you is I was in ceremony and one night, and I'm going through my elder womanhoodship right now, and I was kind of railing and raging about becoming this elder invisible woman. This is a big problem for humankind, by the way. That's for another time, I guess. But in it, I was saying, what do we really mean when because I was trying to find a way out of this, right? I was negotiating. I'm like, what do we really mean when we say feminine? And what do we really mean when we say masculine? And the answer I heard back in this ceremony has changed everything for me. It said, listen, you think you know what the feminine is, but you don't. And you think you know what the masculine is, but you don't. All you know is how these two energetics behave when they're plugged into a power over paradigm. Well, you can. That wasn't my idea. Just so we're clear. And I thought, wow, okay. And so, the continuation of that is these two energetics perform in very different ways when you put them in very different paradigms. And there are human beings on the planet who are still doing their best to not have to hop into this pyramid paradigm, and who are doing their best to maintain a circular, shared power, shared wealth, all the children are fed paradigm. So I've got my eye on those ones. One of my taglines that I use a lot when I'm speaking is to say, so if sustainability is the highest and most sought after technology on the planet, who should we be talking to? We should be talking to those peoples who've known how to live in relative health, harmony, and happiness for extended periods of time in one place, like 1,000 years, 2,000 years, 3,000 years, 5,000 years. These are actually the human beings among us who hold a true science of sustainability. And we tend to call these people indigenous because they are of place. So to be of place requires to have that kind of sustainability. We would call it, my daughter, for some of you who heard her poetry last night, would call it hojo. It's about a relationship. You have to have a deep relationship with place in order to have that kind of sustainability. So how do we go about having this relationship with place? Well, in indigenous culture, so here I am, and that's a very big generalization, but I will go ahead and use it because I travel a lot. I attend a lot of indigenous peoples gatherings. I've spent a lot of time with a variety of indigenous peoples in ceremony and also in conferences like this. And so I feel like, we're talking about these. And so we have some commonalities. We are not the same. We are not pan-indigenous. There's no such thing. They all have very individualistic ways of of specifics about their being and their relationship to place. But nevertheless, we have some commonalities. And so to have this relationship with place requires a certain kind of dialogue with the earth. Now, in modern world, some people might immediately go, that's going to the woo-woo side of town, and I'm not sure I want to go. But for I would say all, boy, that's a big statement, all Indigenous peoples, that's a normal course of life, is to be able to have this conversation with the Mother Earth. And part of the way that happens is through the feminine. Now, I don't know how every culture does this, but I can speak for myself in that part of the way that I have had a conversation with this Mother Earth was that I was told that during my menstruation time, that I come into a place, my biology affords me a spiritual capacity to open and to be able to inquire of this Mother Earth, to be able to receive her nurturing, her nourishment. And I have to. We say that the woman is the backbone of the family. The woman is the backbone of the community. So where does she get fed? Well, she gets fed partly at this time every month by the Mother Earth herself. But not only that, she has an ability to hear, to receive vision, to receive communal vision, not just for her own life and herself so that she can beat out the next girl. No. So that she can help her family, so that she can come back and bring this wisdom to community. So this is a very deep experience of humanity that has been left behind. And what I really want to get to also before my time is through here is that when I have come out of that prayer space and I come back and I have the elder women around me saying, is there anything that happened while you were in that space that you would like to share with your community that would feed us, that would help us, that would nourish us? I want to tell you something. Those words come out, and they don't come out in a linear fashion. They come out with lots of emotion, just like I'm having right now. They come out with a lot of humility. It's a very humbling experience to hear directly from the Mother Earth. And it's a very humbling experience to have the power to express her blessing to the community. And what I want to say is that language is precious. That language of the feminine coming from that place is so precious. And it is not linear. So I come from a family who was taken into Dutch Christian Reformed missionary boarding schools. My grandparents were taken by force. They sent their children for many reasons, including fear of hell and damnation. And then by the time I came along, people weren't practicing my culture. Because in those schools, they were not allowed to speak our language. They were not allowed to practice our culture. And so with my people, we still have a lot of speakers. And my daughter actually speaks more Dine than I do, because there's a renaissance happening. But what I want to say about it is this, is I know what happens when the majority will not hear the way a person expresses their relationship to life. It is damaging. It is damaging for all of us. We lose something. So if that science of sustainability is being held within these languages, and these languages are leaving, every day they're leaving us, we're losing something profound. So what I want to say to you is this. I'm asking that linear, masculine, hurry, fast, louder, please. Get to the point, please. Way of being. I want to say to you, we're missing out on something when we can't hear that quivering voice that is trying to express something powerful from this Mother Earth. That is a feminine voice, and it speaks
in a certain dynamic that this world is unfamiliar with. So if you would condemn the people who slapped my people for using their language, who put bad things in their mouth to try to get them to not speak their own language, then I would ask you to consider what are we doing to the feminine voice? The feminine voice that has a capacity to offer us direct instruction for how to be here. This is a part of the dilemma of this gender that we're talking about. It's not a philosophical thing. It's very down to the earth, very concrete, very practical information that we miss. So my plea these days is to ask, we gotta make a space for that feminine voice to be heard. So, thank you.
I have a stretch in just a minute, but before we have the stretch, any responses?
I really appreciate everything you said, especially about power. But what's sticking with me is what you said about place, and what that means for us in a time when many of us move a lot, right? We don't necessarily stay in one place. We don't stay in one job for 40, 50 years anymore. We don't kind of stay in one place necessarily. Definitely not even, the younger the generation, the less likely you are to stay in one place. And how we then both connect with our mother lands, right? The lands of our ancestors, and the places where we are, right? In Yoruba, right, we believe there's no way to have an ecological movement, right? Because to honor ancestors is to be ecological when your ancestors are rivers and oceans and lands and places, right? So wherever there's a river, there's your ancestor, right? Wherever you see a lake, there's your ancestor. Are you suggesting would you suggest something like that? How might we connect to place when place has new meaning for so many of us?
Well, I really appreciate what you just said about water. So that is a dilemma of modern world, is all this moving about. So I've lived in Taos, New Mexico for 32 years, and most people are like, wow, that's a long time. I feel like, I know, it is a long time. But that's not 1,000 years, right? And so how do I, but even in that period of time, I'm noticing that I have an experience that people who move every 2 or 3 years don't have. Mm-hmm. For instance, one thing I like to bring up is the process of reconciliation in relationship. That's not necessarily necessary when you move around a lot. Mm-hmm. But when you stay put in a small town, you're going to have to figure out something that way. Yeah. So you might have a terrible falling out with somebody, and then your kids grow up, and all of a sudden you're like soccer momming together or something like that, right? And you have to figure out what to do with it. And so in my community, I'm very proud of us that way. We have feuds, and then we move on. And I just think, wow, what must it be like to live, to like never get to experience that reconciliation process, that humility process of finding out how to move forward after conflict. You must be very cynical about the world, thinking that, bridge burned, bridge burned, bridge burned. But there's other ways, and I'm guessing there's people in this part of the world who know something about that. But I also would say that, so for the people who are moving a lot, I think there does have to be a different kind of indigeny process, and that's something that I do talk to people about. So at that point, I get very, very specific about focusing on what this glass of water really holds. If this glass of water has been here since the beginning, because it's always cycling around, then one thing we can say is this glass of water, every one of our ancestors sitting in this room, no matter where you're from on this Mother Earth, had a drink of this water right here. So all of that lineage is present here. So this is the way that I'm beginning to talk to people about feeling and sensing their indigeny, right? Is to, as you said, if the river is there, we can begin to connect. But we have to, we might have to reframe our understanding of who we are, where we are, and how it is. Yeah.
All right. Well, there were so many things that you said that really struck me. But I loved that you named the kind of mysterious connection that we as women and the feminine have with Mother Earth. And that, you know, anyone who's lived in a female body knows that moon times sync up with the moon. I mean, if you give it half a chance, your body syncs up with the cycles of the earth and moon. And that's an amazing thing. And if you're with other women, then you sync up with them. And this is not an accident, right? I mean, millions of years of evolution have brought us that capacity. And how tragic it is that that's exactly what's been demonized. That sacred time when that information directly as a transmission from Mother Life can be available to us as a species, that's been so forbidden and you know, sort of culturally despised. And I also really want to thank you for speaking so eloquently to the nonlinear, to the different forms of communication that want to come through us, you know, and that I think part of it is that we have a language that tends to value things instead of relationship. And if we're shifting toward, I hope, a culture where we value the relationship and the connections more than the things, you know, which is what Fritjof Capra says is most essential to transition to a sustainable future, then it makes sense that our existing language wouldn't know how to communicate that. So how do we open ourselves and listen so carefully and treasure the communication that sounds so other to our unschooled ear and yet is so essential to our survival? Thank you.